70% of Americans, that's like a whopping number, now expect estate planning to be a part of financial advising. And you already kind of mentioned that yourself. Um, we're just curious, like, how have you seen this showing up in your own practice and conversations you've had with clients, like maybe the client initiating interest in estate planning more and more?
Yeah, I think it's twofold, right? You have clients that inevitably, if you're taking the time and having deeper conversations around, what's important to them, you're actually doing the planning portion, right? It's not just the transactional, here's your portfolio, here's how you're invested. Are you happy with it? Great. See you next year, right? If you're actually saying, hey, what's going on in your life? What are some things that you're planning for? What are some things that are top of mind? What are your needs, wants, wishes? Have any of those changed? It always comes up in conversation because in that conversation, there's always going to be multi-generational planning, right? My mom and dad, my spouse, my brother or sister, my kids, my grandkids. And so as soon as you dive into that, it is estate planning. It is talking about, do you have the things necessary to protect yourself, protect your wishes, protect your loved ones? Whether that's through a will, through a trust, through power of attorneys. I have a lot of clients that are dealing with their elderly parents, and they don't have. They're like, oh well, they constantly leverage me to help them do things. Okay, but if were to become incapacitated or incapable of doing that or verbalizing that over the phone or in a meeting, do you actually have the legal power to speak on their behalf and make decisions for them? And more often than not, the answer is no. And so the estate planning is becoming more and more critical. And I do think more often than not, it is more of a discovery conversation of, oh, they bring it up, but not directly. And then we dive in on that when they do bring up that conversation, saying, hey, we need to spend a little bit more time here. Help me understand where you're at on this.
Sounds like more and more there will be a demand for financial advisors to adopt estate planning, whether it be partnering or outsourcing with someone that they'd recommend, or integrating a platform like Trust and Will into their practice and being able to offer those services.
I would
Um,
agree with I would agree with that. I mean, in short, you're going from a transactional kind of broker financial advisor relationship to a life planner.
Our study also found that quite a significant number, 43% of the respondents said that they share like personal family dynamics with their advisors. So it sounds like they get pretty close with them. 18% of them said they share like literally everything about their lives, including skeletons in the closet, maybe TMI stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how how do you build that kind of trust with clients to the point that they're telling you like even their skeletons in their closet?
So divulging some of those secrets, you never know how it's going to impact that financial picture. It might be something where it is very personal. Um, it is a little bit, I guess, for lack of a better term, saucy. Um, uh, o- but at the same time, may have some financial impacts. So yes, we've certainly gotten into conversations where there's maybe an impending divorce, and the significant other doesn't know, or there's issues with the children, and they're thinking about restructuring their trust or their beneficiaries to where one child's no longer part of it, um, or they're going through a period of time where they're actually having to get their parents or a parent declared mentally incompetent, and that is obviously a very stressful, very personal, and very hard conversation, especially if they know that we are multi-generational and we worked with the parents for the last 20 years or 30 years, and we knew them as they were kids growing up, right?
Mhm.
And so those conversations are important, whether they're explicitly relevant to whatever we're working on financially or not. It's kind of irrelevant. We're here for that. If it crosses a line, we'll politely change the subject or make light of it. But outside of that, we're here to listen and we're here to help. So
Yeah, I couldn't help but think that maybe there's a psychological gateway of like, sometimes people have so much shame or anxiety around like their credit card debt, for example, and they're scared to even share that with a parent or a partner. So once they've like shared this, you know, careful
Yeah.
information with their advisor, it might be like a floodgate of like, oh, this is a safe person, safe space for me to tell you everything.
Specifically, we do have that kind of relationship where we keep everything to ourselves, right? We have that client advisor kind of confidentiality and understanding with that. So, they can share maybe their Amazon spending habits and how they're hiding some of that from the significant other, and they need to get it in check, but they need your help. To your point, a little bit of a reprieve for them and a little bit of a gateway where, hey, I've already divulged very personal things in my life to this person and felt safe and secure doing so. And it hasn't come around to bite me. Um, it kind of rips off that band-aid. And the next thing you know, they're sharing things that you're like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I appreciate that you trust me. And, you know, um, you know, and sometimes you take off the financial advisor hat or the life planner hat. You just go as person to person, right? Because it is a relationship and it's two people having a conversation. And maybe there is just your own opinion involved in it. But, I think that's part of the rewarding part of this job is that you do get so dialed into these people's lives that you do end up being like, a very trusted friend or an extension of their family.
More and more seeing that millennials and Gen Z are leading the demand for estate planning and financial planning. Um, so how are you personally engaging with younger clients now? And how are you engaging with them on topics that have traditionally skewed towards older generations?
Yeah, you definitely see so millennials and younger generations become more actively involved in estate planning because I do think, the lessons of the past are showing up, right? At one point, maybe two generations ago, it wasn't really something that a lot of people thought of, except for those that had that were considered ultra high net worth, ultra wealthy folks that were really creating massive estates and legacy plans. And so most people would just have a simple will, if that. I think there have certainly been a period of prosperity since then, and more people do have legacy assets that um, they want to transfer to their kids, to their grandkids, or to whoever the beneficiaries are that they would wish or name. But you see more and more, and I've even experienced this in my own life, where it just was not set up ahead of time. And you see go into probate courts, you see judges and lawyers kind of argue it out, and somebody other than yourself decide who gets your money. And it creates a lot of infighting in families as well. So I think there's some of those lessons that have been had that have been realized by the younger generation. And I do think through the advent of internet, smartphones, and access to these things, that there is some semblance of self-education and access to information and resources where it's more prevalent even in their day-to-day that it is something they should be learning a little bit more on and intellectually curious about. Um, I do see, or at least the guidance that I'm giving to a lot of the younger generations is they'll ask about a trust, they'll ask about a will, they'll ask about things like, protecting their kids or their spouse, but they think they don't have the assets yet to kind of demand that. And I push back on them and say, well, all it is telling everybody that would be involved, should you not be here, or should you and your spouse not be here, how you would want things handled in light of that situation, or should you become incapacitated. So when you're creating a trust, which I encourage everybody to do, even with the initial expense and time commitment to it, it creates all these important directives, not only for when you're gone, but even when you're here. Like if you become incapacitated, who's going to make the financial decisions? Who has the financial POA? Who's going to make the health decisions? Who has the health POA? And they might be different people. I know my spouse, Nicole, probably would not be great to be my health POA. Financial POA, sure. But my health POA, she would just be too emotionally, disrupted should anything tragic happen to me. I would never want to put that burden on her, knowing the person that she is, to say, hey, you know what, I would need to make the decision to pull the plug if that were my wishes. So my uncle is actually my health POA because I know, well, he would pull the plug in a second. No, I'm just but it's something that you kind of think through those things and saying, hey, if I were to have this conversation with my spouse, with my kids, with my loved ones right here and now, and how I would want those wishes to be played out, why not put that in a legal representation? So that way, as you're building well, as you're building your lives together, should something tragic happen, you already have that in place where nobody has to worry about it, or God forbid something were to happen to you, your family could just mourn the loss of you and not be thrown into the courts and thrown into the chaos of we didn't have anything protected and well prepared ahead of time. And so I think the younger generation is more intellectually curious about it. I think they are hesitant in the fact of thinking that they should be creating that now early on. And so right now, I'm trying to bridge that gap with my younger clients saying, no, you should actually be doing this before you build it. Because if somewhere along the way, as you're building it, something happens, we don't know what you want to have happen in that circumstance.
So our findings have revealed that clients are like wanting help with more and more like specified tasks, like please help me figure out my beneficiary designations or tax strategies that we talked about earlier. But they're also second to that, the most popular answer was education and collaboration with their advisor. So where do you currently see like some of the biggest gaps in terms of your clients' understanding and knowledge around estate planning?
I think, well, they're not lawyers, right? And it's not
Mhm.
their field of expertise. So, they get the general concept of it, but they don't get the legal necessities of it, right? And what the different structures mean. So, we'll have clients come and say, well, you know, I'm worried about having to go into a home and then, obviously paying extreme amounts for long-term care and it depleting all the assets that I would want my kids to have or I'd want my spouse to have. And so they ask, is there a way to avoid such an event? And there are several solutions, right? You can look at long-term care coverage, or you can look at an irrevocable trust. But there are also some potential downsides to that, right? If you fund the long-term care coverage, that money is really earmarked for that. If you don't use it, your beneficiaries are going to get the initial premium back, but they're not going to get the growth, right? So if you've had that long-term care coverage for 20 years, you got it in your 40s or 50s, and you just end up passing without having to go into a facility. That initial investment, let's say it's $100,000, they said it was going to cover $800,000 or $700,000 of long-term care. Your beneficiaries don't get 700,000; they get 100,000 back, right, as the death benefit. And so you get that opportunity cost or investment cost. Whereas on the other side of that, if you're doing it in an irrevocable trust, due to some IRS code changes back in 2023, when you transfer assets into an irrevocable trust, they no longer are deemed your assets. And so upon your death, they don't get the step up in cost basis anymore, which could be a huge tax savings to your beneficiaries. And sometimes this conversation happens a little too late to where, there's still the 5-year look back, even in an irrevocable trust. They're going to look to see when those assets transferred in. If not, and it's within that 5-year period, they're still in the irrevocable trust, but there will be a Medicaid penalty due to that. So I think when we're looking at kind of the pointed questions, whereas the, I guess, more general aspects of things, it's important to understand that they're getting bits and pieces of the information. They know it's important, but it's really up to you to kind of tease out what they're trying to achieve and finding the right thing, the right structure, the right blend of structures to achieve what they want or what's more suitable to them.